Okay, I want to just do a quick video of what I would have done in class prior to you taking the test, but just thought we might as well just do it as a video. Okay, so you need to work on memorizing the quadratic formula and being able to do the basics, that is to plug into the quadratic formula. Okay, we're going to work a lot more on making sure we can simplify it correctly and looking at the various types of quadratic equations and that kind of thing. All right, now here's the good part. All right, so what's going to happen is sometimes when you're trying to solve a quadratic equation, like what you see on number 1, the problem doesn't factor. And so far, all you know is how to solve these by factoring. But what happens if it doesn't factor? What do you do? Well, the quadratic formula is one of the techniques that you're going to learn that can help you with that. Now, what can sometimes be a big relief is that if factoring wasn't your thing, the quadratic formula winds up being just a process you can follow. It's just a formula you plug into, so you don't have to do trial and error. Okay. All right, so here's the thing. The formula tells you that if you have a quadratic equation in this form, that just means you've got it with the squared term, then the x term, then the constant equal to 0. You can just pull the numbers that you see in front of x squared, in front of x, and then the constant, and use those and plug them into the formula appropriately. Okay. And so when you're looking at that, it doesn't mean that B is positive and that C is positive. It means that you're going to take whatever you see as the constant, whatever you see as the coefficient of x, could be positive or negative, and whatever you see as the coefficient of x squared. Okay. So for instance, let me just show you. So here, it's already got it equal to 0. So I'm just going to identify the A, the B, and the C. Notice the B was -9. Okay, then what I'm going to do is use the formula. So the formula says the solutions are given by this formula. Opposite of B plus or minus B gets squared minus 4 times A times C, all of that over 2A. So in place of the first parenthesis, I'm going to put a -9 because that's where B goes. Notice this formula says negative B or opposite of B. B itself in this case is -9. Then the formula says take the opposite of that. So eventually that'll become a +9. This notation right here is just because I'm lazy. I don't want to write that whole entire formula once with a plus and once with a minus, but that's what it means. So it's giving you the two solutions you're used to getting on this. Okay, so let me finish this. I'm going to plug in the -9. And notice the B gets squared. So whatever B is, it gets squared. So those parentheses around the -9 are pretty important. Then I have -4 times an A of 1 and a C of 4. All of that divided by 2 times the A, which is 1. Right now, from here to the end, it's a matter of getting that simplified. So you'll be good up to a certain point, and then you might need my help to help you learn how to finish simplifying this. So the opposite of -9 is 9. 2 times 1 is 2. Then under the radical, this -9 got squared. That's -9 times -9. That's 81. Okay, try to really hear me on this. This is under the radical is where people make the most mistakes. This first number is always going to be positive because whatever the B value is, you're going to be squaring that. Try to get your math symbols to say what they mean. So don't get lazy on this. Make sure you're putting those parentheses right there when you plug in your B value. Okay? All right, and now it is minus 4 times 1 times 4, and notice there's only the one negative. So I know it's going to be minus something, and then I just do 4 times 4, which is 16. Okay. All right, so I got just a little more to do. My solutions are going to be 9 plus or minus the square root of. I've just got to take the 81 and subtract 16. So that's going to give me a 5. Is that 55? Nope, 65, I think. Is that right? Okay. Now, this right here is sometimes finished. Sometimes you have more work to do. It'll all depend on what happens over here on the radical part. And this is what we'll work more on later. In this case, 65, when you try to break it down, 5 goes in there, but it goes in there 13 times and there's no other factors. And so it turns out that 65 doesn't contain any perfect squares. So you can't do any more to the square root of 65. That would be considered fully simplified. And your answer would be these two things. Now, this is really two things. It's 9 plus square root of 65 over 2, and it's 9 minus the square root of 65 over 2. Okay, and both of those are approximately equal to some number, some decimal number. But this right here is called the simplest radical form. So you could just leave it together with the plus or minus like that. Would probably be the easiest thing. Okay, now let's try this one. Let's try one more. So with the second one, I don't have it equal to 0. So we have to do that just like we do with, let me change back to the red. I think it's easier to see. Okay. Okay. So let me get that back to red. There we are. Let me get this so it's equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract the 7, and I'm going to have 2x squared plus 3x minus 7 equals 0 when I do that. All right, now this particular problem won't factor. Now, your typical plan, once you know everything, will be to give factoring a quick try, you know, in case it does factor, because that's definitely the fastest way, and you might try all the possibilities. This is the closest one that has the closest potential of working, but there's no way to make it be just 3 in the center. Okay, so your typical plan will be to try factoring, and if that doesn't work, to use the quadratic formula. This one said just use the quadratic formula. So you really on this one would have just come right in and identified A to be 2, B to be 3, C is -7. While you're trying to memorize the formula, if you'll just write it down when you do those 6 problems in that homework I assigned, you'll have it memorized, hopefully. Okay, and also remember there's a link to a story and a song that can help you to do so. Okay, you really need to have it memorized. It helps a whole lot. I don't have you memorize very many things, but the quadratic formula is one of those that you need to be able to use backwards and forwards, and it helps to have it memorized. All right, so that would be the opposite of 3. 3 would also go in that. 3 would get squared, and then you'd have -4 times 2 times -7. Okay, and all of that would be over 2 times 2. Okay, so that's -3 and 4. Under the radical, I have a 9. Now see here how there's a minus, but then there's another negative, and all this is multiplying over here. You should look at those and say, okay, these two negatives, when you're multiplying, would become a positive, and then just do 4 times 2 times 7, which would be 56. Okay. All right. And then we have, my solutions are going to be plus or minus the square root, and it just happens to be 65 again. That, of course, doesn't happen all the time, but I wanted to do some where the simplifying part was not hard, that there wasn't a whole lot to do there. When we come back, we'll be looking at more of these, and also in the homework, you'll see a preview of what it is we have to do. So sometimes what's over here will be the square root of something where you have to do a little more work to get it in simplest radical form. And so that'll be, if you can get this much out of the way, then we can focus on the things that really cause the most trouble when you're doing this. Okay. All right. So that's what I wanted to do. Actually, before you took your test, and then I wanted you to be able to just go and work on that. Okay. All right. So learn the quadratic formula, work those 6 problems, and come in ready to work next Tuesday.